The other big thing that they will probably ask you is some form of behavioral question. It usually starts with, tell me about a time, and then fill in the blank. It's where you have to answer with a personalized story from your past. And for that reason, everybody's answers are going to be different. Now, the problem is there's no way to really anticipate these. There's so many questions that can start with, tell me about a time that something happened. They could say, tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker. Tell me about a time you had a disagreement with your boss. Tell me about a time you showed creativity in your work. Tell me about a time where you failed at a task that your boss gave you and you had to explain it. Tell me about a time where there was an emergency and you had to use creative thinking to resolve it. There's an infinite number of questions like this. So the problem is you can't prepare your answers one question at a time. It's just impossible. So what you do is you do a little bit of preparation. Before your job interview, you've got to practice a couple of stories. I recommend 10, 5 and 5 success stories, 5 failure stories. Now, what you want to do is you want to think back to your career if you've had previous jobs. If you haven't had any previous jobs, think back to your schooling. Okay, what you have done. And think about maybe, say, 5 of your greatest triumphs, your greatest accomplishments. And then think about 5 other stories that are not necessarily failures, but they're conflicts. Tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker or with a boss where you had to resolve something, and rehearse these. Number 1, you got to practice saying them in a very compact way. So you're not blathering on for 10 minutes, trying to tell this stream of consciousness story. So you rehearse saying them in a very compact way. A very useful format is the STAR format: situation, task, action, result. Situation was I was working in this job. Task is my boss told me I had to go and do this. Action is what you did. I did this, it went wrong, somebody got upset, so I had to smooth it over and make a deal and blah, blah, blah. And then result is how it turned out. We accomplished the goal. My boss commended me on being able to put out that fire, and it gave me some credibility. So that's a great template: situation, task, action, result. So rehearse 10 stories from your past. And these things, not only do you have to say them in a compact way, so it doesn't take forever to say this in a job interview, but you've also got to make sure that if you had to do that situation over again, you would do the same thing today. Right? Because the reason they're asking you about your past is because they're going to assume that if you behaved a certain way in that situation in the past, if they were to hire you and that situation came up again, this is how you'd behave. So if there was a conflict and you handled it well in the past, that's what you want to say. Don't pick a story where there was a conflict, but you handled it poorly, but you've since learned how to handle it properly. Don't tell that story, because they're going to assume that if you didn't handle it well in the past, that you won't handle it well if they hire you. So those are called behavioral questions, where you have to answer with specific stories about how you did something. So you go prepared with these 10 stories on the tip of your mind, all ready to go. And then whatever behavioral question they ask you, you're going to pull out one of those 10 stories. It's ready to go. You pick the one that is reasonably close to the question they're asking to, and that's what you say. It flows out. There's no red flags in it. You're good at telling it. It doesn't take up the whole interview, and it doesn't reveal any red flags about you. And if you do that, you're doing pretty well.